Hey guys, I am coming to you today with a shooting breakdown. Why am I doing a shooting breakdown? Well, earlier today I released a video that was body camera footage from a shooting incident that happened in Columbus, Ohio on February the 5th, 2023 at about 3 p.m. In this video interaction, officers attempted to do a traffic stop on a man driving a black pickup truck. That man's name was Michael Cleveland. Michael Cleveland was a convicted felon who was found to be in possession of a firearm. When the officers attempted to stop his truck, he got out of the truck, ran. While running from the officers, they observed him pulling a firearm from the left side of his body somewhere, either in his jacket or his waistband, transition that to his right hand, and then bring it down in a motion that concerned the officer. The officer then fired multiple shots, striking him. I believe he actually was struck 3 times. I can't confirm that for sure. But a lot of people are saying, you know, the officer fired too soon. This isn't justified. This isn't reasonable. The officer should be fired for being trigger happy, all of those things. And that is just not the case. What I'm going to do today is we're going to go through the video up until the moment where the officer chose to fire those shots. I'm also going to give you an actual demonstration of the reason that the officer fired those shots. And then after that, I have multiple news articles showing officers who were shot by fleeing suspects to show that it is 100% reasonable to shoot someone in the back when they are armed with a firearm and you believe that your life is in danger. So without further ado, let's get into the video itself. We're going to watch this through my editing software. You'll kind of understand why in a moment. There's some things that I want to show you that I can only show you in this software. So here is the beginning of the interaction. There's some question about why the officers pulled him over. It was a traffic infraction. I'm going to point out multiple traffic infractions throughout this video. And the first one is actually right here. This is a stop sign violation. When you stop at a stop sign, you got the stop sign here, you bring your car up and you stop before you hit the stop sign. Once you stop, you can then pass the stop sign, look both ways, enter the intersection, and cross through the road. The reason the stop sign is here and you have to stop behind it is because there are crosswalks. You have to stop behind a stop sign before entering the crosswalk and go. And that's regardless of whether or not there's a crosswalk painted on the street. So he stopped after the sidewalk and then started going again. Then in a moment, the officers are actually going to call out when the audio picks up a, stop or turn signal violation. I'm going to turn the audio down on the computer so I can be heard over it when it starts going. But there is the first turn signal violation. And then they're going to get it behind him, and there's another turn signal violation. In the state of Ohio and the city of Columbus, you have to turn on your turn signal 100 feet prior to making a turn. They're saying that he did not do that, and that is their justification for the stop. He just said it, signal within 100 feet. So they're pulling up behind the car. I'll leave that up. It's creeping into an alley. Here's where they initiate the traffic stop. He's going to then get out of the vehicle. They're going to say, "Hey, sir," before they have a chance to give him a command. He's going to take off running.
Hey, sir. Hey, sir.
I think this might be the appropriate time to mention this. The other day, President Biden in the State of the Union address made a comment about how he never had to have the talk with his son about how when you're in a traffic stop, you should have your hands on the steering wheel, turn your dome light on, do everything that the police officer says. First of all, the president is a moron for making that comment because it doesn't matter the color of your skin. That is the way you should conduct yourself during a traffic stop. But secondly, if you remain in your vehicle with your hands on the steering wheel and you do what you're told by the officer, you have almost zero likelihood of getting into a confrontation with an officer. If you get out of your vehicle and you choose to run, the chances of having a negative interaction with the police goes up exponentially. That's what Mr. Cleveland chose to do here. So you can see the officer initially pulled his taser because he thought he might tase him before he actually got around the door of the vehicle. As they begin to run, you'll see that the officer draws his firearm and starts yelling at the Mr. Cleveland to stop running.
Hey, hands up!
At this point in time, the officer is about to start opening fire. I've got this. Let's see if I can bring this up here. What I did was I have this green highlighted section. This was the foot chase in real time. The part that's going to come after this is the foot chase slowed down at 10% speed. If you look at my cursor here down below, the duration of this clip is 1.1 or 1.24 seconds. So this part of the interaction right here, this is actually where Mr. Cleveland is drawing his firearm. We're going to slow it down in a minute so you can see in greater detail. And actually, I'm going to kill the sound on the slow motion part so I can talk over it. But again, watch this in real time.
Hey, hands up!
And I'm going to tell you what the officer saw in this clip that you didn't see because it was going too fast. Mr. Cleveland was running. He had a firearm in his left pocket. He drew that firearm with his left hand, transitioned it into his right hand, kept looking over his shoulder to see where the officer was. He then brings the gun back like he's moving in a motion to go behind him. We're going to watch it at 10% speed and you will get to see what I'm talking about. So they're running. You can see his elbow cocked out like he's reaching. He's definitely reaching into his pocket right here. Begins to play forward. He brings his right hand up to the center of his body here in a second. Right there. This is where he's pulling the gun out of his pocket. That's why you can see his underpants, right? Because he's pulling his jacket up, trying to get that gun out of his pocket. He's then going to reach over with his right hand and transition that gun into his right hand while he's looking over his shoulder to see where the officer is. Right here is the gun in his right hand, and he's bringing it in a motion to bring it behind his back. Seconds after that is when the officer begins. Actually, fractions, milliseconds after that is when the officer made the decision to fire his weapon. If you've watched the live body camera video that I posted on my other YouTube channel, you'll see that as the shots are being fired, the weapon is falling out of his hand. And a lot of people are saying, look, he was just trying to drop the gun. The officer fired too quick. This isn't justified. I've got my desk gun here, and I want to do a demonstration with it for you. The first demonstration I'm going to have for you is how to drop a gun without making the officers fear for their lives. You don't have to bring that gun behind your back in order to drop it. I'm going to show you again. Have a gun. It's a real gun. It's not loaded. You've got the gun in your hand. The hand is in front of your body. There's a police officer behind you. You want to drop that gun so that you're not a threat to the police officer. Drop the gun. It's really that easy. The improper way to drop a gun when there's a police officer behind you is to bring it from here to this location. I'm going to show you why. So, pardon me for showing off my shorts, but let's imagine for a second I'm going to do what Mr. Cleveland did. So he's got a gun on the left side of his body. I don't have a jacket down here. I'm going to do my best to enunciate so you guys can hear me. But he's running, and he draws this firearm with his left hand, which brings his shirt up. The officer can clearly see this man's underpants. He then brings his right hand over, grabs possession of that gun, continues to run, and what the officer sees is his hand going in this direction with a firearm. As Mr. Cleveland, he was looking over his shoulder, he was looking over his left shoulder instead of his right shoulder. But officer sees a gun doing this. Let's think for a second how long it takes for this gun to go from in front of my chest to being pointed back at me. See if you guys can time me. A fleeing suspect does not mean that they are not a dangerous suspect. It takes less than a quarter of a second to get that gun behind your back pull the trigger and fire a round. Now, here's what people are going to say. They're going to say, sure, he can point that gun behind his back and fire off a round, but the officer's not in danger. You're not going to be very accurate when you're reaching behind your back and firing around like that. Well, that's why I have a couple examples that I want to show you. The first example, this is Officer Mike Shannon. Mike Shannon is an officer with the Columbus Division of Police. And on March 13th, 2010, he was shot by a fleeing suspect. He was working special duty at an apartment complex. Somebody alerted him to a suspicious person. They said, hey, Officer Shannon, there's a suspicious person over there. I think you should go talk to him. As he approached that person, the person then ran. It was nighttime, and it was a dark government housing complex. So it was like in the projects. Officer Shannon is chasing after the suspect. Unbeknownst to him, the suspect had a gun. The suspect draws his gun while they're running, reaches behind him, pulls the trigger, and shoots Officer Shannon. Officer Shannon was hit in the femur just above the knee. To this day, he's missing about this much of his leg. It took him 7 years to get back on duty. He didn't know if he was going to bleed out and die that day. Luckily for him, a civilian came by and applied a tourniquet. So Mike Shannon is one of those people who was shot by somebody that wasn't looking, that was running, and fired a gun behind them, striking him, almost killing him. This is an incident that happened last year. This is an officer in Dayton, Ohio. His name is Officer Holloway. Officer Holloway was approaching a suspect who was wanted for, I believe it was shoplifting. As he approached him and said, hey, I'm going to detain you, suspect said, no, screw you, and swung on him and punched him, then tried to run. Officer Holloway deployed his taser, had an effective taser hit. The guy went to the ground. When he went to the ground, he was able to draw a firearm, roll, and shoot Officer Holloway in the head. You can see right here is the scar on the side of his head from where he was hit. If you watch the body camera, there was blood pouring from his head onto the body camera. He was on his hands and knees, believing that he was about to die. If that round that hit him right here had been a couple inches over, maybe a half inch over, he most likely would be dead today. The reason that these incidents happened is because they were shot by a fleeing suspect. A fleeing suspect who a lot of people, for some reason in today's world, think does not pose a danger to the officer. But I'm here to tell you that officers are judged on whether or not their use of force was reasonable. And in situations like this, it is 100% reasonable to shoot a fleeing suspect in the back. Those are my thoughts for today. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you soon.